Okay, so we're now at a point where we can go right back to the beginning of the manual and we can build our rotor head. We've got our frames complete, we've installed the tail, so now we can build our rotor head up and basically just insert it straight into our built frames, and it's not going to hang around waiting to get broken. So we start off with the blade grips and we're going to put the control arms onto the blade grips. Okay, and then we have two built blade grips with control arms. And the next thing for us to do is to get our rotor head, our main head block, which is this piece here, and we need to install into that our feathering spindle so that we've got somewhere to mount our blade grips onto when we put the bearings into them. So next job is to put the feathering spindle and dampers into this. Okay, so here we have our dampers, our tube, our feathering spindle and the head. The kit also includes these red dampers. These are for sports flying and hovering around. This machine is going to be used for 3D, so we want to use the grey dampers, which are harder and designed for 3D flight. The tube just goes into the middle of the head block like so, and then the dampers insert either side. Now these are shaped dampers, so you need to make sure these go in the right way. So if you look at them, they've got like a chamfered edge one side and a flat edge the other, and the flat edge goes into the middle with the chamfered edge towards the sides. But before we put those in, you want to put some silicone grease on them just to make sure that they will run nice and smoothly in the head and won't grab and get torn up. Okay, so there's my dampers installed, and you can see the chamfered edge is to the side, and I put some silicone grease on those. Then take your feathering shaft with the screws still in it and make sure those screws are nicely seated. You now want to just push that all the way through the head with the screws still in it. The reason we leave the screws in is because we don't want to get the grease that we just put on our dampers into our feathering spindle. So that's now inserted in the head. Now we've got that in the head, we can take these screws out, show our feathering shaft bolts, put those to one side, and the next thing we want to do is we want to get some tissue and then roll it up into a point like that and put it down inside the feathering spindle into the holes where the feathering spindle bolts will go. And what you'll find is that it will come out dirty with engineering grease on it, and we want to get that engineering grease out of there, otherwise our Loctite isn't going to work for our feathering spindle bolts. Okay, so our next job is doing the thrust race for our blade grip, and this is really very straightforward. The radial bearings are already installed into the blade grip, so we don't actually need to put those in, they're already in there, as you can see. We're supplied with a spacer, and that literally just drops straight into the blade grip, and that goes between our thrust race and the radial bearing in there. So that goes in first. Then we've just got the thrust race to deal with, and a line is very helpful in this, in that if you look at a thrust race, if you look at the edge of it, you can see that's got out. The camera's struggling with it, but you can see that's got out written on it, and the other one has got in written on it. So the one with in written on it is the one that goes in next, and the one with out written on it is the one that we should be able to see before we put our feathering spindle in, and we should be able to see the word out written there before we put the feathering spindle in. Now the only other thing to take care of is the actual balled race itself. This we need to put some silicone grease on it so it's nicely greased so it will run nicely, and then it goes into the grip balls first. So not that side first, the covered up side, but open-ended first. Goes into the blade grip, so it drops down that way, open-ended first, and then onto the in race, which is already in there, that way up. So this goes in on top of it, like, if I can get it to stay together, like that. So when we look in our blade grip, that's what we'll see, and then the out goes on top of that. And then we can put our feathering spindle, bolt and washer through that and bolt it onto the feathering spindle. Okay, so I just put it together and you can see the word out in there, and then we just got to put our feathering spindle and washer through that and bolt it onto the feathering spindle. Okay, so coming back to our feathering spindle and our head block briefly, there is a little gold spacer, and what we want to do is we want to put that onto the feathering spindle shaft, and it doesn't actually matter, I think, which way around this goes, because I don't think it's got a chamfered edge. So let's put that on there like that. Then the blade grip goes on next, and then we can bolt it on with our feathering spindle bolt. Okay, so there we have one blade grip installed, brass spacer in between the blade grip and the damper, and then if you look in the end of the blade grip you can see our bolt and washer just gone through the bearings. Okay, so now we just need to repeat that for the other side and the other blade grip. Okay, so when you've done that, your rotor head then should look something like this, and you can see the feathering spindle bolts either side. Make sure you put an Allen key in either side and just give it a bit of a tweak just to make sure it's tight. Don't go crazy, but just make sure that both feathering spindle bolts are securely seated and aren't partially out. And once you've done that, we're ready to start building up the rest of the rotor head that sits around this. Okay, so the next job is that this upper mixer here and the other side here need balls on them, and these balls go on the inner, actually, is that correct? Yeah, the balls go on the inner side of these upper mixer arms, so they go towards the head block center. So we need to install those on either side with some Loctite to hold them in place. Okay, so there you can see the balls are Loctited installed. Also take these screws out here, because this is a pre-assembled part. Take these screws out, Loctite them and put them back in, and the same for these center screws which hold the flybar seesaw. Take those out, Loctite them and put them back in again. Okay, so once we've done that, we can build up the flybar cage which goes around that. So I have the parts for that here. Here's our flybar cage. And we need to install the link onto the center of this and then build that up around our flybar seesaw. And once we've done that, we can then put the flybar through and install the paddles. Okay, so here we have the flybar cage built up, and it's really straightforward. Install a couple of links onto it first and then just bolt through in the 4 positions here to get it all together with Loctite. The manual does give us sizing for these links, and that is that the gap in the middle here should be 4.3mm on each of these, which is what I've set these to. And that's pretty much it for building up the flybar cage, and that can now be put around that piece there, like so, but it's a bit harder to do on camera than I thought. Can I get it to go? I can't really get it to go, I have to do it off camera, but basically it goes on there like that, and then the flybar will insert through that to hold it all in place. So I'll get that in position and put the flybar through, and then you can have a look at it. Okay, so there we go, that's the flybar inserted through. Now what we've got to do now is centralise our flybar. So basically we need to get the same distance sticking out this side as we do out of that side to make sure that the flybar rod itself is in balance, and then when we put the paddle, the distance between the edge of the paddle and the edge of the cage here is equal, and again that keeps our head in balance so we don't get any vibration. So I'll go ahead and get this flybar itself in place and then install the paddles as well. Okay, so once you have the paddles installed, it looks something like this. You should have a line written on the top, which means that your paddles are rotating in the correct direction, and also make sure that you sight these with the flybar cage itself and make sure that they are parallel with the flybar cage on both sides, and that the gap here is 131mm. And the paddles actually go a bit tight as you're getting close to 131mm, and then just another couple of turns and then they're correct. Also, when you're doing up this little grub screw, be careful. One of mine's stripped, and it's stripped really easily, so just need to be careful on doing those up that you don't go over the top and strip the thread. Okay, so that's the paddles installed, and now we can move on and bring our swash plate and mixer arms up to meet with our head and start installing things like control rods and that sort of thing to build up our rotor head. Okay, so here we have our main shaft, swash plate, mixer arms. I've already gone through and Loctited all the balls onto the swash plate, and also taken the washout assembly arms off and Loctited everything on those as well to make sure that they're all okay and nothing's going to come loose. And then we can insert the shaft into our head and put our feathering spindle bolt through to bolt everything in place. Sorry, not feathering spindle bolt, our Jesus bolt through to bolt the rotor head to the main shaft. Okay, so I've got here the partially built rotor head. I've put the Jesus bolt through now to hold the rotor head onto the shaft, and also I've installed the ball here on the washout arms either side with some Loctite to hold it in place. The actual washout base itself, the arms come down onto the longer links on the swash plate at the bottom here, and the manual is really quite confusing in terms of what it shows you. Okay, here we have the partially built rotor head, and what I've done here is I've installed the ball onto the washout base itself here on either arm, either side, and also connected the washout base to the swash plate, and it goes to the longer links on the central swash plate, not the shorter ones. So these down links go to the longer arms, which creates a nice right angle on that linkage. The next thing to do is to make up the rods which will connect all of this stuff together. We've got a rod which is going to go from the swash plate down here up to the mixer at the top, and we've also got a short link which is going to go at the top here, and it goes between the mixer arm here and the blade grip arm here. So there's a link to go there and a link to go from the lower swash plate here up to the mixer arm, and then this linkage here, this connects onto our washout ball here, so that goes onto there for that one. So a couple of rods to make up, and then we can connect all the linkages up. Okay, so here we have our now completed rotor head with all the linkages installed. The ones that I've literally just put on now are the longer one here, and this linkage, I'm trying to spin this around so you can see it a little bit better, this linkage here, the gap between the plastic bits of the ball links themselves is 32.2 millimeters. And then the other linkage I put on is the one for the blade grip itself, which is this one here, and the gap in here is 1.5 millimeters. The other linkages we already had on the rotor head, and I've given you the distances for those already, and it was literally a case of popping the linkages onto the balls, and then you can see that the rotor head is effectively completed. So we're now in a position to install our rotor head into our model and install the main gear, tighten up our bearing blocks once the main gear is in, and start putting the finishing touches onto the model.